All right, folks, welcome back
Ooh,
to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. We have episode number 32 today. We're going to be talking about shamanism, plant medicine, and sleep paralysis with our new buddy Lee Adams. How are you doing?
Good, good. Nice to being on the show with you guys.
Thanks
hell
for
Thanks
yeah.
for
coming.
inviting me. Yeah.
So let's dive right into this. Let's start out with the whole. Well, actually, let's get a little bit of your background. So why don't you explain how you got into all this? You know, what made you get into the whole plant medicine psychedelic thing, and then also, the different sleep stuff like sleep paralysis, lucid dreaming, that kind of stuff.
Cool. Yeah. So my initial background is I was interested in psychology, but I had amazing dream experiences when I was a kid. You know, I'd tell my mom about those experiences and annoy her to death with all these crazy dreams that I would come up with every night. But she was kind enough to listen to me. So I was really interested in dreams and psychology and that kind of aspect of it. And so I was going to college at the time for to learn about dreams, and through that, I got a hold of Dr. Strassman's book on DMT, the spirit molecule,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really interested in that because Strassman, as well as Calloway, and he followed up some research with Calloway's stuff. But I was interested in that because he had some direct links to the pineal gland and DMT formation in the brain, possibly causing dreaming. So I was like, what is this DMT thing and what is the experience? Because at the time I was having out of body experiences and lucid dreaming, lucid dreams, things like that. And I really wanted to find a connection between this psychedelic and dreams. And so I decided that maybe I should try DMT in order to see the connection if there was any. And I was pretty blown away by some of the similarities, but at the same time, they're vastly different.
What was your
So
first? Did you ingest it through ayahuasca, or did you smoke it, or what was the first time?
yeah, I ingested it through ayahuasca. So pretty much, I didn't do a traditional ceremony at the time or anything like that. I just figured out how to make it myself, and then did it myself. So I was pretty, I'd say, not educated very well on the traditional use of ayahuasca or anything like that. So it's kind of like a disrespectful thing, I'd say, to the plant. But I definitely learned a lot from the experience, and that kind of opened the doors to more exploring psychedelics along with dreaming and trying to figure that out for myself versus like, be super scientific about it. It definitely opens up a lot. I mean, anybody that's done any mushrooms or anything like that can say it's life transforming. And
Well, you must have been pretty serious because I hear about people taking the ayahuasca and just like all this experience, they shit themselves, they throw up on
yeah,
themselves. I mean, I don't know how true that is. Maybe you can clarify, but sounds
yeah,
very, very intense to me.
yeah, yeah. The situation was that my buddy actually flew up to visit me, and we were going to do it together because he's very knowledgeable about plant medicine and making things and stuff like that. So I didn't really know how to do anything, and I got super sick as well. And you're supposed to fast, so I was like
Yeah.
fasting. I had a cold. I got super sick, and then the next day we were going to do this thing. So I was just like dragging it. I was beat up already, and then you take this drink, and it's like the worst tasting substance you could possibly imagine. It tastes like
Well, is it? It's like tree bark and
yeah,
roots and shit. I mean, it's not.
Tastes like
yeah,
it sounds.
yeah. It's exactly. It tastes like you ever see like Wizard of Oz and the Wicked Witch of the West? She like tries to like poison Dorothy with
Yeah.
like some
Yeah.
green or purple looking stuff. That's like how it reminds me. It's just so horrible tasting. It's uncomparable to anything that else is bitter in your life. So I drank this thing. I'm laying there. I'm having don't know if it's working. That's generally how hallucinogens come on. You're like, oh, maybe it's broken. Maybe something's not
Right.
right. I'm not seeing crazy stuff yet.
Yeah.
And then after a while, we had some like drumming going as well in the background. And after a while, I had like the experience where I was running through my life, like as a child, all the way up to the age I was, and like learning about just life lessons that, you know, traumatic experiences that happened to me with my family and stuff like that. And just kind of slowly going through it and just observing it kind of. And then it was very healing. And then you purge. And so like ayahuasca is known as the purge in South America. And so you throw up, and you're not only purging like, you know, the substance of the plant, you're like getting everything out emotionally as well. So when people purge or throw up, they generally have the most intense hallucinations at that point. So they're very intense. And but I didn't like shit myself though. I haven't had that experience yet.
We believe you.
Yeah.
No, okay. So now when you talk about the process and how it's, you know, it's cleansing, but it's also harsh. Was there something that pushed you into I know you said you were fascinated with dreams, but did you have any sort of anxiety or depression, or was there any
Oh yeah.
sort of thing that this is like, you know, this pushed you in the direction in terms of like some sort of medicinal help for yourself?
Definitely. I mean, with dreams too, I think they're in psychedelics. I think they can help people with depression and stuff. Generally, people that are kind of geared towards depression, I think, have poor sleep habits, and so they often dream a lot as well. So me being a very intense dreamer, I think that was a correlation to being depressed when I was a kid as well. I didn't take ayahuasca to be healed or anything like that. Like I had no intention. I didn't know anything about the healing properties of this plant or anything. Just wanted to see the connection between dreams and psychedelics. And but in result, through maybe about 15 times of ayahuasca and going through this experience over and over again, I realized some truths in my life of that I could rely on, and got away from being depressed. So my perspective of depression has greatly changed from there. I don't think it's for me at least, it wasn't something that was like chronic that was going to happen for the rest of my life. It was kind of like a mixed message in my brain that I really couldn't grasp. And ayahuasca allowed me to, and as well as other experiences, including dreams, after this experience, I was able to kind of communicate to the parts of my brain where I couldn't really understand some things, and my depression ultimately went away. So I do get down, you know, everyone has down days, up days, whatever, but it kind of mellowed me out, made me look a little bit more grounded. So that way depression wasn't a really big factor in my life anymore, luckily. So it helped me out a lot. I did want to talk about sleep paralysis though. I know that was like one thing that you were hitting on.
So initially we started talking, we were actually talking on Reddit. Somebody posted a picture of here, I'll pull it up. Amanita Muscaria, which is the fly garrig, which is the prototypical mushroom you see in, like, you know, fairy tales and in nursery rhymes. And, you know, when they're showing, anytime they show a mushroom, usually in that regard, it's an Amanita Muscaria. I'm going to pull this up here. So this is what we were talking about. And the initial conversation was, somebody posted, what is this mushroom and what does it do? And I posted on there, you know, exactly what we just said. It is hallucinogenic, and if you process it in certain ways, I guess. So I've never done it, but from watching stuff like Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, and there's that little BBC short documentary I think I sent you, where in Siberia the shamans eat them, and then they urinate, and then the reindeer come and lick the urine because they want to get all jacked up, and that's what that does to them. Jesus. Same thing with the reindeer. There's a guy, I forget his name, but he had an art installation in Europe where they would have the reindeer eat the fly garrig, and then they would collect the reindeer urine and then drink that and have a psychedelic experience. Now, it's not your prototypical psychedelic experience, I guess. It's more along the lines of hypnotic, like a hallucinogenic hypnotic type of thing. But
Okay.
there's even speculation that that was the inspiration for Christmas, because the reindeer flying, the reindeer get all jacked up on this thing. I mean, if you look at it, it's red and white, just like we associate with Santa Claus and all that. So who knows? You know, there could have just been, and actually Christmas is based off of a pagan holiday. So, I mean, it's not that far stretch, but yeah, that was the initial conversation, and you commented on it. Somebody had told you differently, and we both kind of I looked more that you actually, I thought I knew a lot about it, and then it made me like relook at it, just to make sure. And sure enough, yeah, there are people that definitely get stuff off of that, and even in Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, they dry them out and then they smoke them, and they say that they can feel stuff. So,
oh, interesting. Yeah. The reason I said that is because I had posted an article about somebody had talked about Christmas and the traditions in Siberia that to go along with Christmas. So like ornaments on a tree is actually drying of mushrooms. So they used to hook the mushrooms up and then dry them on the trees, and then that's how they would store them. So and they were they were the same type of mushroom that you were talking about. So they were obviously psychedelic. But a grad student had come on my blog and commented and said that they were actually doing research on the shamans in the Siberia traditions, and they found out somehow that the reindeer actually don't eat the mushrooms or something. So
there's
that's
that documentary that I know, but that documentary I sent you, it shows the reindeer actually from BBC.
Yeah.
It shows the reindeer eating this thing out of the snow. In fact, they go out of their way to dig through the snow to get to it because it gets them all jacked
So
up.
these guys don't want to believe that this shit they're eating these things, or
yeah, they probably
well, there's an agenda. Anytime you get science and academics, look, I love. I think school is a great thing, but I also think that when people take it from a purely scientific approach and don't look at the cultural and the historical significance of it, I think it gets lost. Like there's a lot of people that have never even done psychedelics, so how would they even know to look down that avenue? And I don't know who that, who the person that posted that or whatever, what their background was, but
definitely, yeah.
I hear that all the time. Even like Bill Nye was on Star Talk, which is a podcast about, astronomy and all that. And, he was talking about psychedelics and I was cringing. I'm like, this guy knows nothing. Not only that, he's not even a scientist himself. He's just a aeronautical engineer. So,
yeah, I mean, I haven't really looked into it much, and it sounds like just from basic Googling, I found like more recent articles talking about the truths that people actually were doing it. And they would actually like put buckets in front of the deer to force them to kind of eat it as well, just so you get them to eat it more. And then like buckets to collect urine so they couldn't like, they wouldn't have hard times doing that. So obviously like these people are really into getting that done. So, I mean, like it's pretty obvious to me that the grad student was wrong, but
if you're willing to drink piss, I think there's something to it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff in India as well for soma, where they talked about drinking urine. So they think that it was a mushroom, some type that had to be processed through the cow's urine, and then they would collect it and drink it. But they don't really know about soma. But yeah, I mean, and I heard, and to put on your point, like I recently heard something where they were talking about animals not looking for psychedelics, like it's only humans that do this. And I was like, that's total BS. I've seen plenty of,
because they show the reindeers after they eat them, they get all crazy and start like hooving up in the air and getting all crazy. So
I knew a dog that liked fucking bud brownies, man. A dog that
nice. Yeah,
whenever I'd bake them, it'd come and look at me and want another one, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah.
Well, maybe it's the type of thing where you have to extract it, or it's like a tincture, like maybe you have to liver process it, or if you made a tincture of it or something like that, that it would, because I know that there's an active chemical in there called muscimol that they've tried to turn into a sleep drug, but somebody had some weird psychedelic reaction to it, and once somebody has a psychedelic reaction to experimental drugs that they're trying for the market, I guess they have to abandon the whole thing or something like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit harsher mushroom, that's for sure. I wouldn't recommend anybody eating that one. So it can make you sick, and I think it's really hard on your liver. I think that's what the issues were. So if anybody is interested in eating it or whatever, they need to do their research before doing that for
I
sure.
mean,
But
we recommend people doing research before you do
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
Just go to Irwid's. Irwid's is
yeah,
I think the quintessential. Or we'll talk about it later. We'll go on in a little bit. But your website, Taileaters.com, there's a lot of
exactly.
information on there too. But let's get into the sleep paralysis thing now, because this is what's been
Yeah,
fascinating me lately, because I think there's something I had my first experience last week, but I'll let you talk for a
nice.
little bit about your research into it and a little bit of the background and everything.
Yeah, so pimp out my friend's website, dreamstudies.org. His name's Ryan Hurd. He's a great guy. He spent his pretty much entire life, and he's much older than I am, researching about sleep paralysis. And so I actually contacted him when I was mid 20s, looking into sleep paralysis, because I had my first experience about 2006. Even though I had like lucid dreams and stuff before that. And I was also like very religious at the time, so that kind of contributed to my experience as well. But when I had sleep paralysis first time, it was very traumatic experience. I worked nights. I used to be in the military, so I worked night shift, and I was laying down in my bed, and I thought my friend had jumped on my back because I was laying face down in my bed. And I had roommates, and one of my roommates was kind of a goofy guy that liked to play pranks on people. So,
A real turd.
yeah, man, that's what happens in the military. You get some pranksters. So, friend jumps on my back, and I'm like, hey, man, get off of me, and he wouldn't move, and I was like, it got me really pissed off, and so I was like, hey, man, get off of me, or I'm going to punch you, and I remember the pressure intensified on my back and pushed my head down on the pillow, and I could feel somebody breathing in my ear. And I was like, hey, I was like, what
I'm not
the fuck
into
is going
this.
on? Yeah, it scared the shit out of me, man. And so then I went to swing, because I was like, this is really obnoxious now. And there was nobody in my room. It was completely empty. And I was so freaked out that I got up out of my bed, and I knew it was impossible, but I was like, maybe my friend like ran around a corner into my bathroom, And so I went into the bathroom, and there's nobody there. And I was like,
See, I'm instantly thinking aliens or demon.
I've had those, man. So yeah, demon, that's the first thing that popped up in my head, it's like, whoa, what the fuck? And
Isn't that what the normal thing that people say when they realize, like, there's a demon sitting on their chest, or that's what that old picture you see with the demon sitting on bed on the guy's chest, or
if you ever heard of old hag syndrome, that's sleep paralysis. That was created from a mythology, I think, in Canada, and where they could kind of put a spell on some people that they didn't like, and an old hag, the hag would come and hag you, which is like terrorize you at night, and they believed it. And there's a great book, I think it's the Terrors That Come in the Night, and I read that, and I was like, oh, this is like it's not only me that this is happening to. But what I wanted to say is that this thing kept coming back to me every night, and eventually I went online. And back then there was like only forums, with like weird people and stuff. And they were like, hey, it was some type of like esoteric group where they're talking about the dweller and the threshold and the guardian of like this gate to the other dimension. I was like, hey, I don't care about that. I just care about getting this thing to stop attacking me, because it was messing up my sleep and everything. I couldn't sleep in that room. So I was like, okay. And they're like, hey, you just got to face it. And I was like, okay. So came in my room, and I was prepared, and I saw it, and it wasn't just a shadow figure that a lot of people see. Like people commonly see things too. And that's kind of a weird aspect of sleep paralysis. There's like commonalities in the hallucinations that people see, it makes it really interesting. But my guy was a shadow figure, but he had a face, and his face was like worms. It was like rotting flesh and worms. And I was just like, it's that that got me, and it scared me to death again. And so the thing picked me up out of my bed and started beating me against the wall. And I was like,
Jesus.
okay. And I woke up, and then I was pretty scared again. And then a couple weeks later, I was like, okay, I gotta do this. I gotta stop this thing. So it came back into my room, just like I could see the door open. It came into my room, and this time for some reason I was laying on my floor, and I was like, something's different. So I stood up, and it immediately started to try to get out of my room, and I grabbed its cloak, like it had a cloak, and I was like, I thought of the only thing I could think of, and I started eating it. Like I just put it in my mouth. Yeah, it was weird. And so I ate it, and it was screaming so loud. It was like the screech sound, and it just ate, and then it was silent. And I was like, well, it's gone. And
did you ever have a moment of like enlightenment, like maybe this is a dream and I'm controlling it? Is that the type of...
Not at the time. That's the weird thing. It's like I didn't really know enough about all this stuff to understand what was happening. But so after I ate this thing, I looked down my stairway, because I was on the 3rd floor, and I could see a light down through the stairs, and I was like, okay, what's down there? So I walked down, and I came into this room. It was a ballroom, like or a hotel lobby, and in the 1940s. It was weird, and they had brass railing. It was so realistic, like I could touch the walls and feel everything. And like I even tasted the wall. I was like, this can't be real. This has to be like, this is a dream. This can't be. It was so real. And then like they had a water fountain there.
Did
like
the
in the
wall
wall
tastes like schnozberries? Or...
tasted like granite, just like the wall looked. It was like a smooth texture. And
yeah.
They had a water fountain in the side, and I went over and used the water fountain. I put water in my hand and squished it around, and it acted like water and tasted like water. But then I walked down this lobby, and I was looking at myself, and I had underwear on. I was like in my underwear because I was sleeping, and all these people that were eating their dinners, they like stopped and looked at me, like, well, what the hell is this guy doing here? And I was like, this is weird. Like I just didn't understand what was happening. But that was my first kind of out of body experience that happened after that. And ever since then, I've had them. So it was kind of like what those esoteric people were talking about. Like sleep paralysis is this weird gateway to like you face the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. They both talk about this experience where you go through, you meet a figure that stops you from the pathway. It's kind of like the dragon holds the gold in like other mythologies.
Yeah, isn't the Tibetan one? Don't you have to give them say certain phrases to certain people to get through the different levels or whatever?
Yeah, and what's interesting about that, it's kind of a side tangent, but most of these religious texts are based off of like you dying, right? Mm-hmm. So they probably had out of body experiences, and they realized that these experiences are much like death, and you can kind of prepare for it. And so what they did is they made a way for people to kind of follow an instruction, right? So that when they die, they can follow this instruction, and it creates their afterlife so that they all go to the same place. Because like what the theory is when you die, and you can do this through out of body experiences, you can experience this, is that this is just a theory, obviously, no way to prove it, but is that you go someplace based off of like your conception of heaven or hell, right? Like every religion has one or whatever. So you go to wherever your conception is of where you want to go, like where you plan to go, where your world you created in your practice in life. So, but if everybody has their own, then everyone kind of just goes all over the place. Nobody ends up at the same place. So the Buddhists and the Egyptians, the idea is that they created these guidelines so that people could go to the same place and meet up. It's kind of like, it's like a beacon kind of.
Sure.
So that's kind of the same thing. So like when I had my out of body experience, you could say that I went to somebody else's like afterlife reality or something like that. And it wasn't mine. I was confused. I was like, what the hell is this? But that's kind of the idea behind it. A lot of people agree with that theory. I mean, there's no
No,
scientific
I've
evidence.
actually never heard that. That's
pretty
super
sweet,
super.
man.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I've never
Yeah.
heard the take on it, and it actually kind of makes sense. I'm big into ancient Egypt and stuff like that. Like you're saying, Book of the Dead. I mean, I'm sure you've seen our little logo with the
Yeah,
two.
yeah,
That's from the
definitely.
Book of the Dead. So yeah, I mean, I just think that you're right about the dreaming thing. I think that when you do psychedelics, it's kind of the closest thing to dreaming. Same thing with meditation. I meditate a lot. Um, people talk about astral projection. I don't know if it's that, but I get sometimes I won't even notice in 2 hours have passed, and I'm so deep that I'm like actually seeing things.
Yeah.
Or in different places too. Like I'm off somewhere. Like I saw some weird tower, almost like not the Tower of Babel, but something similar looking last week when I was meditating, and I was deep into it too.
Yeah.
It was almost like a picture, like somebody drew a picture, but
Definitely. So I mean, like out of body experiences and astral projection are like the same words pretty much. And the same thing with lucid dreaming too. There's like aspects of lucid dreaming where it's like out of body experiences as well. The only difference between like an out of body experience and a lucid dream is like in a lucid dream, you're in a dream and you know you're dreaming and you can control the dream. An out of body experience is kind of like you don't really, you're kind of an observer in a way. And additionally, it feels a lot more real. So like people say it feels more real than real. And I can say that too. I can agree, because you no longer have like your eyes, your mouth, your ears, your senses that way. You're like a point of consciousness. So you're only limited by what you kind of understand as your senses. So you can see in 360 degrees, or more actually, from all angles, if you were able to do that. You're not limited by eyes and ears and stuff. So you can bring in all this information that you normally can't. And like what you were kind of describing is like active imagination or remote viewing too, like certain aspects of that. But I think they're all tied together. They're all going to the same place.
I got to ask you a question though. It feels like there's participation though when I meditate deep. Like I feel like there's something, and I'm not saying I'm contacting anything, but I feel like there's something else that's because it's not just my imagination, because it's almost like a communication. Like people say praying, I always tell them start meditating, because meditating, you're actually in contact with something or someone or a whole plane of something, something. That's just my personal.
No, definitely. I'm not saying
like hoaxy. Like I don't believe in like crazy shit. Like I do believe in scientifically backed stuff, like what we're talking about, like plant medicine, psychedelic, sleep paralysis, all that. But I'm not like this person that's like, oh, I've been abducted and this.
I totally understand. I'll answer your first question, like or not question, but your observation, the interaction that you're having when you're meditating, whatever. I'm not saying that it's like a one-way observation. Like it's like going to another country. And for me, so like I'll go someplace and I'll observe it, and I'm like trying to understand the culture and what's happening around me, and I can talk to people and stuff like that. That to me is like astral projection or out of body experiencing. I'm like, what's going on here? Who are these people? What are they doing here? And like a lucid dream, I'm like, oh, these are my people, like this is my brain. I'm creating this world. Right. And an out of body experience, I mean, it's very possible I'm still creating it, but it doesn't feel that way at all. It feels like this is completely outside of me. Like I am another space, much like a psychedelic experience. And I would say that a psychedelic experience is not even as quality of an experience as a out of body experience. They are much more realistic. Clarity is like absolutely, it's not crazy time. It's like you can actually communicate with other people, get clear messages. It's as real as you and me. Like if we had a cup of coffee or whatever,
well, it's that old thing that I think Dennis McKenna, always talks about. It's like if it's real to you, if you've experienced it, then it is real.
Yeah.
Like it's actually happening and you're experiencing it. Now, does it have some bearing on everything or science or that's a different question? But if you're experiencing it, it's real.
Definitely, yeah. So I mean, like you were talking about abductions and stuff like that as well, for alien abductions. And if you look into it, a lot of alien abductions happen when people are asleep.
Right.
Most of them do. So I've had alien abductions in sleep paralysis. I know that they're, it's sleep paralysis, but shit's going on,
Right.
and I'm like, whatever. So like most people are actually terrified of sleep paralysis, and for good reason. It's a very scary experience.
Does that make it worse, do you think? Does that make it sleep?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it worse for you because you react to it.
I'm saying, does it make it does it agitate what's causing it more? I guess is what I'm asking.
No, I don't think so, because I myself and also Ryan Hearn, who's that the dream studies guy, he and I both agree that the experience can be terrifying regardless of how cool you are with it. Like I will still have some crazy creepy thing come in my room every once in a while and try to torment me, and it's just as creepy as the first day I saw it, but what I react to it is differently, and so I just typically I'm more annoyed of it just being there, so I'm just like kind of ignore it and try to get away from just like shaking off something.
Sure.
Just like get off of me. And more I've realized that I try to understand it more. In one instance of sleep paralysis that I had, I was talking to a Buddhist teacher I was taking a class of Buddhism, and I told the teacher, I was like, hey, I have these sleep paralysis things, and typically at the time I just attack it, like the first moment I saw it, I'd be like, just run at it and destroy it as fast as possible. And my teacher said something profound. He's like, why are you doing that? He's like, why don't you try to sit down and try to understand it? And I was like, oh, that I'd never thought of that,
Right,
and so he's like, well, try it. And so the next night I tried it. I sat down, and to me it was a zombie at the time. It came over, and I was like, hey, do whatever you got to do, zombie. And I put my head down, because I'm always like the old school zombies where they bite the brain out,
Sure.
So I put my head down, and he bit my brain, and then it was quiet, and I was like, oh, I'm still alive. And I looked up, and I was like, hey, sit with me, and so it sat down, and I noticed that it transformed, and it was actually a copy of myself. And I was like, hey, like, what's wrong? And it said, I'm disappointed. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And it said, I'm disappointed. He had like nothing else to say besides that. And I was like, okay. And then in the distance, I saw another zombie, and I was like, hey, sit down with us. And it sat down, and it was the same thing. It was disappointed. I was like, okay. And so then I was like, just watching these two, and they took out wires out of their stomach, like electrical wires, and then they connected it to each other, and then they merged into one, and then they merged into me, and then I woke up. And I was like, that was weird. And something that...
Were they both evil, or was one of them different than the other one?
No, they're both the same. But I mean,
that's a sweet music video.
yeah, it would be. It would be really trippy. But the thing I think to learn about it is like, I mean, I'm still confused if these things are external or part of us, and I guess maybe they're all the same, one and the same. But when that happened and I woke up, my life changed. Something dramatic changed in my life. I felt different internally, and Carl Jung said that you merge with the shadow. Like, I read this after I didn't even know Carl Jung really at the time. And he talked about shadow work and merging with the shadow to actually become more than yourself, than your current self. He said that's the only way humans can actually progress. And I mean, obviously, like, most people take that like not literally, but I think he actually was talking about literal stuff. He just wasn't allowed to say the stuff, like archetypes and stuff. So I merged with it, and it progressed my life. And I think doing that with sleep paralysis, like the hallucinations that you see in sleep paralysis, is really profound if you can actually face your fear in that experience, and then not just overcome it with like anger and attacking it, but approach it with understanding. Wouldn't say love, but more understanding and acceptance. Sometimes it's not successful though, and so, but
Well, that's almost a metaphor for everything in life, you know. If you approach these assholes with love and understanding, you know, doesn't always work out, but you know,
at least you tried, right?
yeah, exactly.
So I mean, sleep paralysis to me is definitely a gateway to another aspect of reality, and but it's these people that are having like alien abductions and stuff. It's just driven by fear, and they can overcome that as well. But I know you're wanting to get into shamanism as well, and that kind of leads into that.
I just wanted to touch on that point real quick too. So
Yeah.
I think I told you about my first experience with sleep paralysis the other day. I barely got any sleep the night before. I'm an insomniac. I don't go to bed till super late, but I don't have I'm in real estate, so I kind of make my own schedule. So if I rarely have stuff early in the morning, because people aren't seeing houses unless it's the weekend or something. But so I tend to, work around that. But in terms of my whole life, I've had insomnia. But it was shocking to me the first time that I had it because it really wasn't anything too different than that it's ever happened before. But I got probably 3 hours of sleep. Then the next day, I went to work for a little bit, came home and was doing more work on my computer, just sitting down. I put my computer down for a second, and then just took probably like an hour nap, I'd say 45 minutes. And when I woke up, like, I'm not joking you, felt like somebody was dragging me back into the couch, and then this white light flooded over me and I couldn't move. I was fighting it. I was fighting it so hard. And it was almost like I was strapped to a table or something. So back, to the thing you were saying about abductions, I could totally see that being why people, think they're being abducted or whatever, because if you didn't know what was happening, like, that would be a plausible explanation. Now, I'm still not sold on that's just why we think of the gray archetype or that kind of, there's something to that. I don't know if that's our future or like maybe that's what we're going to become eventually, and we can see it now subliminally or something like that. But I think there's something going on there. But it's so ingrained into our culture now that I could totally see that being in people's subconscious and coming out during those episodes for sure.
Definitely, man. Well, I mean, you're lucky that you didn't really have any they're called hypnagogic hallucinations. So people see terrifying things, like the worst thing you could possibly imagine. Sometimes
it's just a white light. Just flooding
you're lucky,
over
man.
Yeah.
But if you, at that point, if you knew to relax, just let it happen.
That's how I got out of it. I stopped fighting it because I can't beat this. Whatever this thing is, I'm already.
Yeah, there's like a threshold, man. Like, so all these people that practice lucid dreaming, mostly out of body experiences, there's like a threshold that you get to where you can't control it anymore. So like you're accidentally getting to the point where you're over this threshold where it's like you're going in this area regardless if you want to or not, and you can resist it, and it becomes very painful. And often people have like extreme vibrations that happen during this time, and I think that's produced by resistance or trauma. So you're like trying to hold on to reality,
Mm-hmm.
And you could say the same thing as happens in psychedelic experience. Like, I often shake quite dramatically when I'm having those substances, and other people don't. And probably my shaking is caused by my grasp on, I'm like, I don't want this to happen, after I take it, I'm like, not going there again. So, but I mean, I've definitely seen like gray aliens, and with no intention to see gray aliens in sleep paralysis. And
I think you have an interesting background. Oh, so you were in the military though. Were you ever deployed anywhere? Were you?
Yeah.
Okay. So I know people that have been in Desert Storm. We have a couple cousins, one in Desert Storm, one at Iraq. And they were saying, one of them was saying something about like shadow people or something. And just, you have like I said, you have a more rational, what's out there. You've been out in these terrains. Do you think there's anything plausible with the whole UFO alien phenomenon? Or is
definitely, man.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was a little kid, like not little, but I think about 14 or so, I was like obsessed with space, man. And, so saved up all my money, went to space camp, like, you know,
Nice.
had that whole thing. And I met this dude there, and he was like, he lived in Oregon, and I lived in Idaho at the time. And we were like, hey, let's meet up, you know, in the summertime, just come over for like a month. He's like, cool. So he ended up coming over, and we just slept outside watching like the stars every single night. And I was like, sweet, you know, like we're having a great time. Well, it was like 12 o'clock or something like that. It was late at night and everyone's asleep. And I see this light like in the distance, and I'm like, you know, we have airplanes that come around where I used to live all the time. So I just imagined it was like a helicopter or an airplane. And, you know, it started getting closer to my house, and I was like, that's weird, you know, and kept getting closer and closer and closer. And finally I was like, I was kind of concerned about it. And, you know, like at that point, do I run inside my house and tell my parents, you know, like an airplane's coming to crash in my house or something?
Right.
You know, I was just like dumbfounded by what was happening. And it kept getting closer. And eventually it got so close, I was like petrified, you know, like paralyzed or whatever, by this light. And I was like, just watching it. And then it stopped, and it went straight up in the air, faster than I've ever seen any aircraft go in my entire life. I've seen space shuttles take off in Cape Canaveral, and it went much faster than that. Like I'm talking like
Kind of like that go fast video that they recently released from, I think that, what's that guy's name? Alonzo something.
Oh,
Luis
yeah.
Elizondo or something. Some guy that was the head of one of those, you know how they just released the
Nimitz one.
Yeah, exactly. So
I was on the Nimitz before, but I wasn't there when that happened. But yeah, I definitely watched the video. It was faster than anything that we have is known the capability of producing. And this
we
is
know
like,
what blackbirds are. We know what, you know, B-2 bombers are. We
this
know
is not that.
You know, we know all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it can't be. And you know, even satellites, you know what, because you can see it come back to the same exact spot every however long, you know.
So
17 minutes.
the interesting thing though is like at this time, you know, like people would say, oh, well, you had sleep paralysis, you were hallucinating. That's what I would think, you know, like I was just dreaming.
Right.
Well, so this thing goes up, and it goes so high, it curved over the horizon. So I know that it like left the atmosphere. And
you're telling me the Earth isn't flat, dude?
Yeah.
See, there you're wrong, bro. I'm gonna have to bust you on that one.
If you watch real missiles take off and you watch them all the way like the space shuttle, it doesn't just go straight up. That actually starts curving, and it looks like it falls down like past over the ground eventually. It's weird. So they go straight up for a while, and then they start curving down, and it's like a weird phenomenon. And this thing did the exact same thing. And so that's why I knew. I was like, man, this shit went like high and fast. And my friend, who I thought was asleep, he said, what the fuck was that? And so I always tell the story, you know, this is like when I'm 14. So I tracked the guy down, you know, I was like, maybe I'm, you know, over time, like my memory of this story came bad, you know, and like I'm just telling some people some bullshit, you know.
Right.
And I caught up with him, and he said that was the most profound experience he's ever had in his entire life. And so I know that, you know, it was something very real to him. And this is before drones or anything like that. And what always got me, man, is like this thing traveled so fast and so high, and it didn't break the sound barrier, and it went way faster than the sound barrier. And that's something that's always bothered me. I'm like, how did it do that? You know, even if it was us, it's like, how the hell did that thing do that? So
that's crazy.
Yeah. So aliens.
Next time we have you on, we're gonna get more into that whole thing.
Yeah.
I think that could be a whole different episode.
Yeah, I got lots of info, man. Aliens is an interesting one to me. I always, and I've seen a lot of aliens in my psychedelic experiences. Definitely, I always see, not always, but I often see gray alien people things. You know.
Well, I know it's common like on DMT. People say they see that archetype a lot, or the machine elves, which some people associate with that same thing. I've heard an interesting theory that all the stuff is actually the same possible entity or external force. It's just putting on masks for whatever situation is called for, whether it's sleeping or seeing a UFO. You expect to see this certain thing in certain instances, but in reality, it's the same thing or something. That's
definitely, yeah.
Thought that was
I mean, that resonates with what I've experienced in my life, man. Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into shamanism now. have you ever been to a real shaman, like somebody that's considered,
No, not in like South America or anything like that. I mean, I've met with what I would consider shamans, like in America. They're Native Americans, but they wouldn't call themselves shamans. They were more, it was odd. They were more like witches, like
Gotcha.
legitimate ones, and they didn't. They were more witch like than I've ever experienced in my entire life. But that was like during a peyote ceremony that I had, and it was really cool. But not like meeting traditional shamans.
Peyote's super rare and super hard to grow to the point where it's being you can harvest it, right? Isn't that?
Yeah, it's over
not like
harvest.
it's not like a common thing. You don't see it out
No.
there because it's not
It
easy.
takes years to grow to the size enough to make a peyote button, and then
What's the psychedelic? Oh, is it mescaline? What's in that?
Yeah,
mescaline, yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's an entirely different conversation with the difference between ayahuasca and mescaline or peyote, as well as other cacti that I've tried. But
have you ever had San Pedro?
Yeah, San Pedro. I enjoy San Pedro. I've had it twice. It's it's a good positive experience versus like peyote is pretty traumatic for me, anyways. It's pretty
Isn't that
intense.
similar to ayahuasca? You like barf and you got to consider it lasts more than 24 hours.
Yeah, for me. It lasts about 8 hours.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't barf or anything. I didn't throw up or crap my pants, but it was definitely it's not as bitter. It doesn't make you purge, I don't think, like ayahuasca. If you take that, you're pretty much guaranteed to like puke your guts out. San Pedro, or not San Pedro, peyote, yeah, I didn't have that experience, and there was quite a few other people there and they didn't do that either, so didn't seem like that was a big deal. But shamanism, so
these witches though, did they scare? Was it like a scary element to it?
No.
Hey,
Yeah, it wasn't like
drink your head.
yeah, it wasn't like that. It was like,
They go, hold on, the guy puts on a huge mole on his face and puts a hat on.
Yeah, no, they kind of looked like that, but at the same time they were like good witches, so they were really interesting
Glenda,
people.
the good witch.
Yeah, but they weren't like they like wore black, like it was weird. It was like two ideas in my head colliding at the same time. I'm like, what's going on here? But they never said they were witches. It's just like what I kind of got out of it. I was like, man, these guys are legit,
So did they help you? Did they help you through the experience?
Yeah.
Was it did you feel like you would have had? Now I've heard this. Okay, so when they talk about shamans on these shows like Hamilton's Utopia, or they're talking about Joe Rogan or Dennis McKenna or Terrence McKenna, they talk about the shaman or whatever guiding you because it is such an intense thing. It's nice to have somebody chanting something, or if you are having issues, to have like almost like a babysitter there to guide you through the experience.
Yeah. So I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about like shamanistic initiations as well, from what I've learned. So usually like a shaman's good because they sing Icaros, they're called in South America. So South American shamans, and they sing songs and stuff like that to actually call in their spirits and stuff. And as well as they do like they blow smoke on you, like tobacco smoke, and sage and stuff like that. And then they also suck certain areas, so they can suck like sickness out of your body. So
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, and
Get that poison out.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's like sucking poison. So I think a lot of these things come from those cultures, traditions, not so much like they may do something, but I think there's like a big disconnect between like Western medicine and then people going to South America and like have this experience, or even Costa Rica now, I guess, whatever, anywhere it's legal, is they're doing things that are traditional for those cultures, like sucking, maybe back in the day they had a lot of poisonous bug bites and things like that, and sucking is usually like, a way to get rid of it, right? So they were like, yeah, we just suck, that's what we do to get the poison out. But like to us, that doesn't make any sense. So like in our psyche, We're like, what are they? Oh, they're just doing something, it doesn't really mean anything to us. the songs in the native language and stuff like that. They speak Spanish, or they're from Peru, so they think they speak I can't remember the name right now, but another Spanish-like language. And so a gringo, a white guy going down there or whatever, American, we don't understand what they're even saying half the time, and these songs are made very to their culture and like what things are happening. So what I'm getting at is like, it's kind of like a big show in a way. They put on this big show, and it's not really appropriate to Westerners for this medicine to work on them, And additionally, like, one thing that people don't understand is like, often in South America, the shamans would be the ones that took the ayahuasca, not the patients. So like, that's how they would talk to the doctors, and they call them doctors, and they're spirits, right? And the spirits would come and the doctors would take care of the patients, not the shaman really either. The shaman is just like a helper. And sometimes they would even take ayahuasca. Like the shaman initiation, to be a real shaman in South America, is that you pretty much you have a master shaman, and then your initiate, and then your apprentice, and you get put away from people. You go on a diet, and it's not just a eating diet, it's also a diet away from people, and you get locked in a shed pretty much, and you drink like little bits of water and juice and eat like plantains, so like the most dull food you can eat, and then you just drink plants, like a specific plant, for a long time. So like that's how they learn how to use that plant, and then through those experiences, then they know how to talk to the spirits, and then they can administer like the different plants and stuff like that to help people out, or just pull the sickness out themselves. They don't actually like typically giving people ayahuasca, like they do now, and then making tons of money. So like, additionally, like ayahuasca isn't typically like hallucinogenic to a lot of people. Like it may be mildly, because people purge out most of the content of it before it can get absorbed into their brain. And they also like make it in such a way that it's really hard to absorb. So, which, to us, it doesn't make any sense. It's like we're trying to see visions and stuff. So what the shamans will do, and to me, it's dangerous. They'll add additional plants into the mix. And it's a big concern to me, because it's like these people are going to South America to take ayahuasca, which is safe, but they add in like datura and stuff like that, which is like a much stronger hallucinogen, and it's a lot more dangerous than ayahuasca. It's not really researched on the toxicity. Right. And so they're kind of poisoning people and making them see stuff. So they're like, oh, you saw what you wanted to see, now leave, kind of thing,
Have you ever seen the documentary The Last Shaman on Netflix?
No, I haven't seen that.
So I'm not, just a little synapse. This guy, he's going to kill himself. He's given himself a deadline. He's that depressed. His life is that miserable. His parents are both, on the board of like John Hopkins or something else. They're doctors, and he himself goes to Harvard, but he's just the most depressed person, I guess, on the face of the earth. So he gave himself a deadline. He's going to kill himself if this doesn't work. So he goes down, I think it's Peru, into or no, maybe it was Brazil. I don't know. I forget. Anyways, it's worth a watch. But he goes down there, and there's so many people when he gets down there on the side of the road, right when you get down to the main part of town, that are holding up jugs trying to sell this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not even like where, so like the whole movie is about him finding this one guy that truly still wants to heal people and having a transformative experience through that. And it transforms him, into being happy with himself and stuff like that. It's definitely worth a watch. It's not the best movie, but it's kind of what you're talking about. But I feel like what you're saying kind of correlated with that, with them adding that stuff in and not really taking the more medicine man or shaman approach, and just trying to sell this stuff so people can just do it without any sort of guidance,
there's a lot more safer places that, because of the internet, people can actually like kind of hone on the unsafe places and get rid of them. So there are safe places out there to take ayahuasca, but I would say it's not really traditional still. But I took ayahuasca quite a few times, and definitely changed my life and helped me improve my life overall. So one shaman that I did talk to, and I continually talk to, told, I was like, how do you become a shaman? I always wanted to understand that, not necessarily for me to become one or anything like that, but I was like, how do you do this? Because it seems like anybody is kind of it's just a term people can use, like I'm a shaman, it's
Right.
like, okay, well, what credential did you get, And she was definitely as a shaman. She sent me like 600 pages of her notes, journal entries throughout the years, and like talked about all the extreme stuff she went through. And she travels the world helping people, doesn't do it for money anyways. She told me, she's like, hey, the plants will tell you whatever you need to know. You don't need to travel to spend thousands of dollars to come to South America. If you have the capability of doing the plants and doing it the correct way, you will learn everything you need to know about what they're going to teach you. Because it's not like, you don't have to go to somebody that is an expert in the field. No one's an expert in the field, because the shamans are even calling in the experts when they take the ayahuasca. They're not doing it themselves. They're not magical power people,
Right.
It's not what happens here. So, I mean, people want to worship someone, I think. And so they look for the shaman. They're like, oh, this guy or this woman knows stuff that I don't know. And it's like, well, they may know stuff, but they know how to call people, They're like, let me call my friend. Hey, that's what they're really doing. They're not like doing anything themselves, if that makes sense. And that's like, that's more traditional shamanism than anything. But what I really wanted to get into for the shaman stuff is not just South America, because one thing that recently I've been on this shaman journey for a long time, trying to understand what is a shaman still. It's like, how does somebody become that? And so I took a class on shamanism from this university I'm going to, and they had a good book, and it's actually named Shamanism, and it's like an esoteric journey, I think. And it's very old, it's very academic, but one thing that they discussed in there is commonalities throughout all cultures that this guy researched, which is quite a bit, where people have these experiences, and it ties actually into alien abductions as well. And you can actually Google this. You can Google like shamanistic initiations and abductions, and some grad student somewhere wrote his like master thesis on this actually, and show the correlations between it. But what happens is these people, these initiates or whatever, these people called to become shamans, they essentially have a dream, right? And in the dream, they experience sleep paralysis, oddly enough, and they either get pulled down, like yours,
Right.
they get pulled down to the underworld, and they get dissected. And it's a common thing for some reason throughout all these different cultures. These people get chopped up, pretty much get chopped up into pieces, and then put back together and then come back. So it's either their underworld or it's like in the heavens. And so I was like, man, like, and it sounded exactly like an alien abduction, where they saw these things as spirits. They're like, oh, the spirits pulled me up,
Right.
And us, we're like, because of media and stuff and everything, we're like, it's freaking aliens, aliens got us. They look the same. They talk about them being the same, and they pull them up into space. They don't call it space.
That's the vision of your ego dissolving, though. Like, do you think that's what's happening? Like, and by the way, we'll get into this, but I think initially I thought it's good to dissolve your ego completely, but then lately I've been, we got into Rudolf Steiner and a lot of philosophers and stuff. And the ego is essential to your being too. Kind of like what you're saying, embrace the shadow. Maybe your ego is your shadow, and instead of feeding it bad stuff, you embrace it and become this duality of consciousness.
Yeah. So there's a few things that I'm not keen on. I'm not keen on enlightenment. I don't, and everything that I've ever researched and everything, chasing enlightenment, I think is a bad way of going about things. Like, happiness is like right now. It's like, it's today. It's on this world. Like, this is life.
Right.
Regardless if it's real or not, this is what's going on. Ego, like you said, ego exists, right? It exists in all people for some reason. Animals may even have ego, you know. It's like we had a talk with them, maybe they have egos, and it's like dissolving something to the point that it doesn't exist anymore. That seems unhuman, you know. It seems like you're trying to kill yourself. So like often a lot of terms that I've heard in like the psychedelic community and stuff seems to be death related. A lot of people fearful of death or fearful of being alive. So they kind of don't want to be involved in this reality. They like want to exist somewhere else, you know? And it's like, okay, I get that, you know, like I've gone through that existential crisis in my life where I'm like, this sucks, you know, like reality's lame, you know, I want to go do something else. And it's like, nah, man, this is what is happening now. For some reason it exists and it happens right now. So it's like, I'm tapping, sorry. So it's like, if it's happening and exists, be part of it, you know, do the things that are important right now while you have it, so that when you die or whatever happens, you know, then that happens, you know, it will come. It's just, there's no rush, you know? So, so I think the ego, I think life, I think all this stuff exists today for some reason, you know, like, it happened. So we should take part of it. And the ego, I think, is something that, you know, it always goes to the middle ground, right? The middle path. It's like, I think that's the best way to live. It's like, should you like inflate your ego as much as possible? It's like, well, if you do, whatever, dude, you know, it's like, that's your thing, you know. Is it that bad? I don't know. I can't judge you, you know, everyone's going to die. So it's like some dude that spent his entire life up in his ego. It's like, whatever, man, that's what you did, you know, and then you died. Congrats.
And then he's coming back as a butt plug.
Yeah, maybe. Dude. Yeah.
Pump it up.
Yeah, dude. But it's also, you know, it's like, well, just enjoy the time you got, you know, like do what you can while you're here. So I mean, yeah. So I agree with you. I don't think egos is something that you should trying to dissolve, because you're killing yourself, you know, in a way. I think it's kind of counterproductive to being conscious, you know.
Absolutely.
So, but so what I was getting to with the shamanism, sorry to go back to that, man, but I gotta make
let's get this in there. I like
it. So these shamans, and this is actually the only requirement that they have that was like, I mean, each culture had their own little requirements, you know. They'd have to do like some ceremony or something like that, right? And it would be different. But the general consensus throughout all shamans practices that this guy researched, and there's quite a few, they had this experience where they would go and then be chopped up and then brought back. And if they did that, that was it. There was no like, you have to like fast, you know, on some psychedelic for, you know, years or whatever, or anything like that. No, that was it. That was enough for you to be able to understand the concept of dying, rebirth, and coming back to help people. So like, so I think that's the only requirement. I mean, that's the only scientific like requirement that I could find for like an actual legitimate shaman. So like,
so do you believe it is a real thing then, or do you think it's just a term associated with people that actually understand these plants in their own natural environment?
I think it's real. Okay, so people that listen may be upset at this, but whatever, I don't care. I think that people that use plants that haven't had this experience that I'm describing aren't shamans. They're like naturalistic healers, you know, but they're not like the definition of what a shaman is.
I'd agree with you.
Yeah, and I fought with like people in my class about it because they were like, "No, anybody can be a shaman." I was like,
well, you go to any school nowadays, and you're gonna fight with a lot of people if you have if you have a reasonable take on things. You're gonna find people that don't have reasonable takes.
Yeah. And don't make jokes either, man.
Yeah, they don't. Like
everything's off limits.
I like jokes.
Yeah, life's serious, bro. This is a serious topic. All right.
Yeah, I think the main. I mean, that's the experience. So like, and it's odd to me, like, and I find it odd that these people that have sleep paralysis, in a weird way, are having the initial shamanistic initiation experience that this guy talked about in his research like 60 years ago, at least, you know, and it was common throughout all societies. And it's like, I'm in a Facebook group of like 13,000 people that are like absolutely terrified of sleep paralysis. Like I can't do anything to change their mind about it.
Yeah, you have all the
And
people, the religious people. Oh, it's the demons
yeah,
for sure, and you better pray to Jesus tonight. And Jesus, there's
Well, it's
some people that say,
I wanted to say
well,
something real quick.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
funny because when you're describing that, being cut apart and then put back together, it almost sounds like the Christ story almost.
yeah.
So,
It's exactly the same thing, man. Like, I mean, so if you go to like, I think his name is John Calloway. He did the hopefully I'm getting his name right. He's the Hero's Journey guy. Um, he wrote books on it and everything. And what he found is there's these common mythologies throughout all societies where they have these experiences, and they're all related to the same thing. And if you listen to his mythology he's talking about, and he dissects them, and he kind of creates like a general theme of all of them, they are so close related to shamanistic type experiences, where these people go through these experiences and then they have some ability to like help people, because the idea is that you traveled someplace, you gain some knowledge, and you come back, and then you can help people. And I don't really know what that means, like I don't know what you get or what that whole process means and why we have it like in our brains and why this happens to us, but it does. It's happened for thousands of years, and there's themes in all religious texts talking about these experiences, and Christianity is not limited to it. And and that's another thing, is like what I've recently learned is that Christianity isn't limited to isn't against out of body experiences and all this stuff either. Like these monks and stuff, like
no, dude,
they're doing it too.
all that stuff's the I grew up, I went to Catholic schools.
yeah, it depends on what department you're fucking with.
Right.
I come from a Catholic background. I can honestly tell you what was going on, and I hate to say it, but I mean, I believe in God. I actually believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I believe in all that. The problem is there was this thing, the Catholic Church, and it maybe started off as a pure good thing, but like anything else, it gets corrupted. And then you have popes running armies.
Yeah.
You have, egos running wild. You have all sorts of gross, disgusting shit happening with priests and kids and all sorts of shit. So for me, when I look at it's almost like they were selling themselves as the conduit to a god or a deity or gods or whatever. And in reality, you don't need that conduit. You are the conduit. You can meditate. You can take psychedelics. You can dream. You can have lucid dreams. Those are the connections. It has nothing to do with some guy waving his hand or doing ceremonial magic, or all that goes back to even ancient Egyptian times, where we get a lot of the Christian when you go to a Catholic mass, or a lot of that stuff's based off of even ancient Egyptian stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I used to be hard on like Christianity, because I was like, oh, I used to be Christian and I lost my faith, and they got it all wrong or whatever like that, but I think and a lot of great philosophers would say the same thing. Every religion goes the same place too. It's all some part of the same source in a way. Like once you get down to it, it's about like understanding your own spiritual practice and experience in life, and then eventually dying and going someplace, hopefully better. But I recently found like an actual old wood cutting of some Catholic saint. Then he was like literally flying through like people's walls and stuff like that, like messing with them while they're sleeping. And he rescued like a bunch of prisoners in the story. And that's why he was like a saint, but he did it when he was having an out-of-body experience. And so I was like, what the hell, like these people even like have paintings of this, it's like, right. But like my family is very Christian, and if I speak of this kind of stuff, they're like, whoa.
I'm not against Christian. My whole family still goes to church. I will still go to church with them if it's like a holiday or whatever. The problem I have, like I said, is this concept that you have to save yourself by going to church, or you must go every Sunday, or you must not eat meat on Friday. No, that to me is if you're logical. If you're it's tradition, but if you're a logical person, it's not necessary. It's not. Again, there's so many ways that you can go about tapping into the same thing without actually having to go to church. And actually, I can make the point church is a lot of bullshit for, not that the priests aren't good or anything like that, but just that it's a business like anything else. They want you to keep coming back. They want you to donate to their parish. They want you to do all the stuff that's going to keep them going and doing what they're doing. And that's good. And there's probably some sort of moral, I look at it as like religion and church is needed for a long time to correct our animalistic natures. Don't kill people. Don't screw your neighbor's wife. Don't steal. Don't cheat. All that stuff. Those are all great morals. And I think we, I feel like we're on the cusp of this evolutionary break off right now where we can either continue down this path and something bad will happen, or we can break off and use these plant medicines and learn from the past through ancient knowledge and just all that kind of stuff. I think that there's so many people out there wrapped up in their day to day. They don't look at some of these themes and some of these storylines. If you, like you're saying, there's a commonistic or a common thread between all these ancient civilizations using all these medicines and stuff. Well, I think that goes for a lot of things, whether it's a belief in God or culture stuff, anything like that. I think that that's the glue, so if
Definitely.
we can tap
Preach
into
on now.
if we can tap into all that and use that instead of just looking at it and saying, oh, that's cool, or oh yeah, that's interesting. No, there's something there. There's a reason why they built the pyramids. There's a reason why they people have been using these plant medicines for thousands of years. There's a reason for these things, that these traditions have continued. And I even look at what you're saying. You've done ayahuasca. There's 4,000, 5,000 plants in the jungle, and they were in the Amazon jungle, and they were able to find the one MAOI inhibitor, and then the one, the root that containing high amounts of DMT. So it's like, how did they find that out? Were people just boiling roots and then one hit, or?
Yeah, and they, I hear this over and over again. They always say that the plants told them how to find it.
Graham Hancock always says that when he's on different stuff, and I believe it, but it's like, where was that genesis? Where was that origin point? How long ago was that?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I mean, like, I'm not against Christianity or religion either, in the sense that it provides people a culture and a community, and it creates a mythology that I think every person needs a mythology to believe in, so that they can have a foundation to their life. And like, I went to a psychedelic meetup yesterday in Seattle, and the people there were really great people and very interesting. And they came from all areas of life. And one guy said, he's like, I don't go to church anymore. And he's like, and I feel lost, and I was like, and that's why he showed up. He's older, and he's like, I just can't talk to people about this stuff. And I was like, it made sense. I was like, this is his church, like he's creating commune with other people around something that speaks to him, and another thing is like, Jesus said that, every person is their own temple now. You don't have to go to a temple, the Mormons might not like that idea, but and
Jesus meditated too.
Yeah.
Read the life of Jesus. I mean, it's in the Urantia papers. I don't know what other texts involved, because most people think Jesus either as a baby or 33-year-old getting crucified. They don't really know too much, but there is the life of Jesus out there, anybody looking for it. And it does talk about how he would meditate to speak to his Father, as opposed to prayer. Prayer is like a one-way help signal. Meditation's like a conversation.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think community is what, is really important to people, man. And I think today, for one, the destruction of like churches generally, like people aren't going to them as much and stuff like that. People are losing a lot of that community that they used to have, and there's no replacement. So people are going to the internet and communicating. And unfortunately, I mean, I enjoyed the talk with you guys today, but I wish we, could sit down and have a beer or something.
Do you know how many trolls or idiots like are on that? It was rare to find. Okay, so we started talking on Reddit, like I said, about Amanita Muscaria. We were actually having an intelligent conversation back and forth. I can't tell you how many dumb people that are just looking to get their rocks off, or think they know what they're talking about, or And it's hard because it's like I want to tell this person kind of what's up, but I don't want to come off like an asshole either. But there are so many trolls, and even when you think that you're trying to help somebody, then they're just fucking with you or whatever, you know. So it's like that part of the internet pisses me off to the point where it's like I barely go on Facebook, only to look at like family pictures and stuff, because I think Facebook's the worst at that. But,
I'm always on the defensive. Like I thought about this like a couple days ago. I was like, you know, I really want to connect to a lot of people, especially through like Reddit and the Psychonaut group and stuff like that, as well as Facebook and stuff. Really want to connect to people, but the problem is like every time I go on these outlets, I'm always on the defensive about how they look at my information and stuff. You know, if it's not perfect,
people want to fight too. That's just, so people have this like
want to fight.
They just want to debate. They want to be right. I actually, we always talk about Joe Rogan because I think Joe Rogan's probably got the best podcast out there. But he talks a lot about it where people are just looking to win. They just want to win. Their life sucks, or this sucks for them, or that sucks for them. They can't get their way, so they go on the internet, and it makes them feel better to either put people down or get in a debate where they're throwing stuff out there, kind of like what you're saying. I feel the same way. I feel like I can't even make a comment without knowing that I'm gonna have to respond. I'm like,
you better know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, when I post on Reddit, I know what's coming. I'm waiting for somebody.
Just waiting.
And that's the best one because that's usually the most intelligent people, where I actually have learned a lot about ancient Egypt and astronomy, and you get real astrophysicists on there, and you get all
but you're feeding into it too because you know what you're getting into.
But I'm not debating it in a negative way. I'm just putting facts out there. I like to, like, you know, him, like, did I, you know, Lee, did I come at you hard? No, we had a nice conversation. That's the way I approach it. If somebody starts getting shitty, I'll get shitty too, but I don't initiate that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think real communication is, and Joe Rogan actually talked about in one of his episodes. He was talking, I think Michael Pollan actually, when he was interviewing him, he's talking about like actually having real conversations with people, because there's so many trolls out there just trying to start fights and stuff. And it's like, I mean, that's why I went. I mean, it's like a 2-hour drive for me to get to this psychedelic group meeting, but I was like, you know, I gotta make the effort to talk to people in person, because it's like I want to build relationships. It was so great, man. I was like, finally, people that, and I found out they actually live closer to me. Like people drove all the way there from here to go there. So I was like, hey, let's meet up.
Where are you at? You're out in Seattle? Is that where you're saying?
Near Seattle, like on the by Tacoma. And so like I'm meeting up with some guys on Thursday, even though I just talked to them Sunday, you know, they're just dying for conversations, you know. So people, like, you know,
at the bit, huh?
Anybody that's listen to this, you know, it's like if you feel like you're ostracized, depressed, and shitty, you know, and you're just like, I hate my life, you know, because I can't talk to anybody about my feelings and shit, you know, because like nobody will listen to me at church. It's like, hey man, there's groups online, just go out and talk to these people. They're as awkward, if not more awkward than you are, you know, and they want to talk, and you just say, hey, how's it going, you know? And next thing you know, you got a friend. So don't stay in your room, you know, like get out, do that.
Reach out.
Yeah.
So what, when you look at the state of things, we've almost gotten to the point where it looks like the pressure's on for federally legalizing marijuana and CBD and all that stuff. There's still a couple instances here or there, somebody not being able to get CBD or being taken away, or like that one little girl that has epilepsy, where I think they took her away from her parents in Georgia.
Oh yeah.
You know, you have instances like that are just like, this stuff helps this person, and she's like literally having grand mal seizures all over the place. Why can't you just take, like, why? It's just so asinine to me. It's ridiculous, but I guess that still exists out there. But it looks like we're getting close. And then you got the MAPS research into MDMA. You've got California, they're doing the psilocybin with dying cancer patients. And I even saw Peter Thiel, the guy that invested in Facebook, was making the way to push the way for the whole now psilocybin movement in California. So I mean, we'll see about that. But what do you think about all these trials and all this actual science and research going into all this stuff?
I think it's great. I think I mean, I was in the military. I got medically discharged because I have like severe back pain and hip problems. So for me, I would have loved to actually be able to use CDB while I was in the military, or THC even, like a combination of it. I didn't really understand marijuana while I was in, so I was like, hey, I heard it takes care of the pain, whatever helps. But they were prescribing me like mild opiates, for pain management, and I was like, I would take it, and I was like, man, this shit just makes me like off. I don't feel
Tired
good.
and itchy and
Yeah.
disgusting. I hate that. Opiates I think are the worst to me. I don't know how it reacts with everybody, but I've never liked taking it, involuntary or voluntary.
I mean, it made me feel like every day was Christmas too. And I was like, this isn't good. Like if I go to work in the shittiest place possible and it's like I'm having a great time, something's not right, like so
see, I get the military thing though. Like I get not allowing it for
to get
if
high.
You're an active if you're in active service, you shouldn't be. You're putting your life at risk and other people's lives at risk. Now,
there's a different way of like. I mean,
but if you're out of it though, if you're not in active combat, let's say you're stationed somewhere, you should. If you're in pain, man, like what the fuck? They know that it helps. It's been proven, So and it's non-addictive to the point where I think we've all had to quit a few times. Anybody that smokes in their life has had to quit here and there, and it's not anything. I don't see anything in terms of like negative results when you quit.
I mean, I'll take breaks, like for a week or something, and I'm like, I feel no withdrawal symptoms. Some people do, I guess, but I personally don't from marijuana.
Well, I quit smoking too, just vaping the extract shit. I mean, I don't think you can get better than, as far as like a clear, non-invasive, you're not getting the body buzz or anything like that either. So.
But I mean, their concern is that, somebody will smoke marijuana and then come to work and be high and but it's like, well, the military has a huge problem with alcoholism and like people just massive amounts of people getting hammered and coming to work. Like there was an instance where this guy was carrying a tree underneath his car trying to get to work. And it was like the wrong time even. He just blacked out and he woke up and he thought it was the next day and he was late for work. So he ran over a tree and then dragged it all the way to the ship. And it was like an open captain's mast, which means like you have like 1,000 people standing around a stage pretty much. It's like an old school prosecution, off with his head kind of thing. And it's like, look at this guy and how screwed up he is, and it's like, well, like, yeah, he's messed up, but it's like, why is he messed up? How did he get to this point? And it's like, for me, didn't want to take opiates. Alcohol was kind of like a better way of managing the pain because I could sober up and not feel like shit the next day too, so it was helping a little bit, but I knew like that's not like a way to live, so I was counting down the days so I could get out and try weed. I was like, maybe this will help, and it did. It greatly reduced my pain, and my wife will tell anybody, she's like, I can tell when he's not smoking because he starts getting agitated and like
not screaming at me.
Yeah, man. Weed makes you make it so you don't want to fight with people. And
yeah, it's awesome.
What about PTSD? Do you think that I mean, I know people that say that it's helped theirs, but what do you think about any of this plant, whether it be, marijuana or even some of the psychedelics helping with
definitely
the PTSD?
One thing I think psychedelics do, and Michael Pollan talked about it, is that like it allows your brain to kind of shut down certain areas so that you can actually kind of think through problems. So weed makes me kind of think a little bit more, but what I've noticed is it makes me think differently than I typically would. So I can actually come at a problem from a different angle. Psychedelics, I think mushrooms and other, psychedelics, they definitely allow you to see the problem that you're having in your life at a different angle and then think about it differently with long-term effects. So you can learn from that, like, I don't know about you guys, but since I started smoking weed, like I'll hear something like an argument or something like that, and I'll think about it, and then I'll think about it with like something I would say. And what I found is like through that thinking, I'm like, I would never have thought of that typically.
Or you can restrain yourself and then say the thing that makes more sense.
Yeah,
that type of thing.
I've come to like an idea of weed where the reason people don't fight is because we like continually think about the problem. So like I always like, I'll get mad at someone, and then I'll be like, oh, I'm going to say this. And then I'll be like, well, should I say that? And then like the
People
weed
say
kicks
it's
in.
paranoia, but wouldn't you say it's just a heightened state of awareness? Like you're more aware, so
Yeah.
you're less likely to your subconscious allowing you to say or dictate things through that.
Yeah, I mean, like if I'm high and I'm angry or something or whatever, I'll be definitely more aware of like the multiple different ways of like attacking that problem or thinking about that problem, to the point so that I realize eventually that it's not even worth commenting on, and then I just don't say anything, and I think that's what weed kind of does. It's like, like a weed guy or a hippie or a pothead or whatever may be like mad at somebody in like a bar or something like that, but the weed guy is like, he thinks about it so much he just talks himself out of having the fight, versus the bar, the drunk guys is like whatever, and he just like starts punching people,
He smashes the bottle and attacks you.
Yeah. So the weed guy's like, I just thought about it to the point I just lost, train of thought, and I don't care anymore.
I don't even want to move right now.
It's like, I'm good. So yeah, man, I think PTSD, anxiety, a lot of military people have that, and obviously PTSD, it's good for that. Obviously it would be great if somebody that has PTSD is like in a counseling session where they actually like get high, and then can talk about their problems, whatever. And on top of that, there's research showing, and this research is like negative towards marijuana, but I think it's absolutely positive, where people that are high are extremely suggestible. So you're actually higher in hypnosis than typically you can get through traditional hypnosis therapy. So if you got high and then somebody talks about your problems and says like, hey, like they're giving you a counseling session, whatever, you're actually more willing to listen to people because you're hypnotized to like actually through marijuana than you would be through normal hypnosis. So like for me, I eat a lot, like when I'm high or whatever. And so I just started telling myself to eat healthy, like when I'm high. So I like hypnotize myself through weed. And what I found is the more I did that, the less I wanted to eat bad food. And it happened really quickly. So then I would get high and I'd be like, oh, I have the munchies, And instead of like going for the bag of Doritos or whatever, I would just go for like grapes or some veggies or drink water, things like that. And it really was effective. It's kind of like a progressive thing. You have to keep kind of doing it every once in a while, but it's super effective. And I mean, anybody that's gotten high and like watched like YouTube videos or anything like that about like research or anything, even like bizarre thoughts, like bizarre videos on controversial ideas, whatever, like I've found myself to be, kind of starting to believe.
Suggestible.
I'm like, oh yeah,
the Earth is flat.
Yeah, I'm like,
that's why I thought the Earth was flat for fucking 2 days.
I did watch the Earth is flat video when I was high, and I was like, okay, I can't believe this shit, but I'm like, man, it sounds really good.
How come the Earth doesn't spin underneath the helicopter?
They are convincing. After you watch 10 of them in a row, it's like, wait a minute, maybe this thing is flat. Am I an idiot for thinking it's round now? This is fucked up.
Like, I gotta sober up. Shit.
Then you watch like 5 minutes of why the Earth is round. You're like, all right, well, I gotta get out of this, man.
I'm back to zero now.
Blame YouTube for that. That's
man.
That's like suggesting. You can even like, for instance, I'll watch a documentary on something that somewhat has merit, some scientific merit, but then the next thing will have no scientific merit, So it's like they need to be better at like matching.
Well, they link the shit so you could be
based on title. I mean, I don't know. These algorithms, they can tell you if you have other people's music, but they can't tell you if some fucking idiot said the Earth's flat.
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, man.
But yeah, let's.
Why are there no doctors that say the Earth's flat? Why are there no scientists that back it up? It's always just Joe YouTube.
One more thing I want to ask you too. What's the deal with those on your website? And I'm going to pull up your website right now. What's the deal with the lucid dream pill thing that's on there? Why don't you explain that?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, you could actually say some of them are psychoactive. I think some of them are. They're not just listed as a psychoactive drug, though. But so anybody that's into lucid dreaming and they kind of want to use a quicker method because life is in the way. Lucid dreaming supplements are huge. Thomas Usack wrote a blog or wrote a book about it and it was a very well researched book. But in his book, he talked about different supplements and how they can help you to alter your brain, just like psychedelics do, right? In a way that you can remember your dreams. You have a better chance to remember your dreams, or experiencing different.
What's in the supplements?
There's a lot of different supplements. So like, I mean, these are some of these are like plants, you know, that you would find out in your spice rack or whatever, you know. Like,
what about like melatonin? Does that even work?
Yeah, melatonin is what can be considered a lucid dreaming supplement as well. But so each this is kind of a complex topic, but each supplement does something specific inside your brain, and it releases chemicals. So serotonin, acetylcholine, nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. It activates these receptors, which change how your brain how your brain thinks, or how it remembers things. It moves. You can actually chemically move sleep around. So like REM, you can physically or chemically push it to later on in the night. So 5-HTP, which is a precursor to serotonin, it actually will restrict REM until it wears off. So it says whenever 5-HTP or serotonin is activated, REM doesn't exist, right?
Would that help with people with anxiety too? Because like I know I had bad OCD. The whole reason why we're talking is because I've used some of the same methods we've talked about to get over my OCD to the point where it's almost non-existent. Once in a while, something will pop up and I'll have to deal with it for like a day or so. But once I go to sleep and wake up the next day, it's back to normal. So when I went to the doctor initially, they're like, "Oh, it's your serotonin levels, and we got to give you this and give you that." Every single thing they gave me made me feel worse. It's like, what the fuck are they prescribing? And I literally took every SSRI, MAOI, all that stuff. It was fucking me up. So I stopped taking it all and just went strictly, from the earth. And here I am, far better than where I was.
That's good, man.
But my question was that help with normal anxiety, that 5-HTP?
Yeah, I mean, so that's based off of the serotonin theory that, people that are depressed typically have lower serotonin in their brains. So 5-HTP would increase the amount of serotonin that you have in your brain. And that's why it works for dreams as well. But on a side note, what researchers have found is that the majority of your serotonin is actually in your stomach. So it's released through the stomach and then goes to the brain. So what I think, this is a side note, but depression may be linked directly to gut flora as well as like what you eat. So people that have depression should probably look at what they're eating and try to change their diet maybe to see if that would help before. Obviously they listen to their doctor and decide for themselves.
Did you see the study that just came out linking schizophrenia to the same thing you're talking about? How it might be created through malabsorption of certain needed, whether it be, vitamin D or whatever, B12 or whatever's lacking, that could create an environment in your brain in which you hallucinate because your body's not getting the nutrients that it needs. You can look it up. I'm sure there's a bunch of studies out there, but yeah, they recently came out, and that used to be an old myth too about that, and then they dispelled it, and now they're going back to it, which seems to be a lot of this stuff goes, but that makes sense. And to be honest with you, I started watching Food Network like 4 years ago too, and started really getting into cooking. And now I don't eat any like fast food or junk, and I feel way better, I have more energy. So I think you're right. I think what we put in our bodies in terms of food, and I don't drink alcohol or anything, so I think that has a lot.
That's huge too. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that by doing that, you're cleaning out your pineal gland, decalcifying it. If you're using turmeric and different, apple cider vinegar when you cook, that kind of stuff. I agree with you about the whole gut flora thing. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Definitely. Yeah. So melatonin's good for putting you to sleep. Obviously, that's what people take it. Melatonin's produced in your pineal gland. So if your pineal gland is calcified due to fluoride, then you can try to help yourself that way. But it's also produced, your pineal gland only produces melatonin when there's absolutely zero light available. And that also means that light going through your eyelids counts as light going to your pineal gland. So like if somebody leaves the TV on at night, things like that, or look at screens before they go to bed, they're not producing any type of melatonin in their pineal gland, and then they obviously have troubles going to sleep. Melatonin is a sleep, it's not a sleep initiator, it's like a sleep helper. So it is what helps you go to sleep.
Like if you can get relaxed enough first and then let that kick in and assist you into fall, that's kind of what
right. Yeah, it definitely makes people tired and affects people differently too. I don't take melatonin just because I don't have any problems going to sleep. But my wife does, and it helps her go to sleep. So if you're trying to get a better night's rest, then melatonin is a great alternative to turning off all the lights if you can't do that.
Didn't they dispel the whole tryptophan thing too? And I know we can talk about that, but tryptophan's one molecule away from DMT and a lot of other psychedelics.
Yeah. So, well, serotonin is tryptophan too. It's a form of it. So they're all trying to get to like all these things are precursors in order to get to like the main chemicals inside your brain. So precursors eventually get converted into that, and like I think melatonin gets converted into beta carbolines or something like that. And I had an article somewhere on my website about the connection between dreams and psychedelics as well.
Okay.
And I can send that to you guys after the podcast.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, your website's awesome. We're on here
Thanks,
now.
man.
I'm just looking around. I was looking around the other day too. You got a whole thing. It looks like you've got a discussion thing where you can kind of go on and have intelligent, discussions with people, and you got your blog, dream, sleep, consciousness, psychedelics, spirituality, and you do a podcast too. By the way, anybody listening to this, go on and check out. I was listening to one about the Icaros, so yeah, there's stuff on there too, and you can sign up on the website too and subscribe. I highly recommend you do it because all this research is fascinating, and I think that anybody interested in this topic should definitely be intaking anything they can.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate the pimp out on my website there.
No
the main thing I'm trying to do with the website is create a group of people, a type of commune in a way, online to get a bunch of people together where they can actually talk. And I try to weed out people that aren't really, I try to weed out the trolls. So I personally interview each person to make sure that they're
smart.
Somebody on there that can contribute. And the rules state that I wanted to make it so that people would listen to each other and they would listen to themselves. So not just like lie to themselves. And if somebody needs help or something like that, they would actually listen to their what their brain is saying to them and their mind is saying and soul saying and saying, hey, I need to get help, versus like, continually cycling around and doing the same thing over and over again in life. So that's kind of what I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make a community of people that can actually talk about real stuff and like try to figure it out. I'm more of like a scientific guy, so that's where I kind of come from. But there's a lot of people in there that are non-scientific. There's spiritual people, things like that, and they mostly the group's about interested in out-of-body experiences and stuff right now, but trying to get more engaged audience for psychedelics as well, and not just talk about like the massive amounts of drugs that they can take, but more like what they're learning from it and how they can implement that experience into their life and actually make real long-lasting changes versus just like, when's the next trip going to happen, So that's what I'm trying to do.
People say they don't like the word or the term plant medicine. I like it because of this. Specifically what you just said about people, how much can I take? Oh man, I got so fucked up. I saw a purple elephant dancing across the room. That kind of stuff pisses me off because, I mean, anybody that's really either had an experience or understands this whole realm of things knows that that's bullshit. And I hate when I see that kind of stuff. So when people hear the word medicine, they think medicine. And some people abuse medicine, but for the most part, medicine is a word that I associate with healing or don't take too much or just a little bit and see what happens kind of a thing. So that's kind of what I like that term, is because if you start saying psychedelics, well, then we could be talking about our experience at a Fish concert or, what we did, when we did stupid shit in high school, stuff like that. So I think there's validity to this, but we got to be careful because these are powerful tools, these are powerful things, and they should definitely, like we were talking about shamans. There is a reason there are shamans. There is a reason why this stuff is illegal for the most part. I'm not saying it shouldn't be legal. It should be an option at some point. Hopefully, it gets there. But in terms of it is a potent, brew per se for most of this stuff. So, take a little bit and figure it out and don't get too crazy would be my, advice to anybody. And then just adhere to it, like let go and just let the experience happen. I think what you were saying earlier about fighting it and people shaking, I see that stuff too. It's like you just let it, like what you were saying about the sleep paralysis too, just let it overtake you. Let it. And once I did that and just let whatever was going to happen, it was peaceful and it got you out of there. So,
yeah. I mean, okay. So I've taken a decent amount of psychedelics, high doses, seen some crazy shit. I'm a guy that visually sees stuff. Like, my friends won't be seeing anything, on low doses or whatever. And I'm sitting there like hallucinating hardcore. That's just how it works for me for some reason. But what I can say is that, dreams, even though a massive amount of crazy stuff that I've seen through psychedelics, if you want to trip balls, have a dream. Have a out-of-body experience. There's a lucid dream, because nothing is going to be as real and quality of an experience as that. But if you're trying to heal yourself, or you're trying to understand yourself in a different way, or think about something a different way, then psychedelics are a great tool to get. And and medicine's, that's great. That's a good term. I think it is a medicine, but I also think in a way, it's like a spirit, right? Like I think we have a misunderstanding of spirits as well. But for me, it's like a friend. If I want to go get advice, then from psilocybin, then I take psilocybin, and psilocybin gives me some advice about my life. It doesn't fix my life for me, but it gives me another way of looking at it, and it talks to me and it communicates in a way that I can understand, and we have a decent relationship. If I want to get if I really fucked up in life and I want to get my head bashed in, from a friend, and tells me, hey, stop fucking up, then I'll go to ayahuasca, because that's what I'm going to get from that friend. It's not going to be always a good conversation. So, sure. I think these things to me are friends, and it's just like a relationship that I have with my good friends. It's a two-way conversation, but I'm also learning from them and listening, but I don't go in for the trip. I happen to see a lot of crazy shit, but that's not why I'm there anymore. I'm there for the communication and learning. If I really want to have a trippy experience, I go back to dreams, because that's just how it is.
I agree with you. I think meditation and dreaming, look, when I was younger in high school, we did all this shit. We don't, and it wasn't even in a spiritual capacity, but I know the power of it and I know what it does. So, I've done it, in my adult life too. I have no need to do it now. I think you're right. I think meditation, lucid dreaming are the most potent forms of that. And I think you get more out of it too. It's more insightful. Not that psychedelics can't be, but I just feel like there's got to be a set and a setting, and then everything's got to line right to come out of it. Like you've seen somebody in a movie that I went on a vision quest or had a crazy experience. I think that happens, but not at the pace that people think it happens, but I think you were right about the whole lucid dreaming, and I like to think, I think meditation does that for me as well. So I think that there are things that you can do to touch into these realms without taking a supplement or a drug or anything like that. So I think that's a good point too. It's like there should be all options, but there's no real one way, because everybody's different, So.
Yeah. What we really need is education reform in the country, and not just America, like all through Europe as well. America's not the only one with problems. Asia's got their own problems too, with drug policies and stuff like that too. They're very restrictive, just like America, if not worse.
They're the ones making all these crazy synthetic drugs that are.
Yeah, but they're not taking them because
of course not.
They get put in jail quick and their head cut off and stuff like that. So, they're very harsh laws over there. But what I think is that people just we need a way to actually educate people scientifically and logically about medicine and psychedelics as a medicine, and how to properly use this stuff in our lives versus like the no drugs at all policy is not working. It doesn't work for the military either. So it just doesn't work. But proper education on the dangers and the positives of each drug, I think, regardless of the drug too, needs to be done. Like cocaine, and like cocaine used to be sold in grocery stores, you know, and in World War II,
Coca-Cola.
World War II, people took I can't think of the name right now. They took
like lauded.
God, I gotta make me think about it. Meth. They took meth.
Oh yeah, I was reading that. Actually, there's a lot of people that think Hitler was all methed out.
He was, man. He had severe depression, and so they thought the cure to depression was.
Well, what do you think Adderall is? Adderall is like legal meth, basically. It's pretty much what it is.
Yeah. So, so our concept of drugs.
Here, take Adderall, but don't take something that helps you. Take this thing that's gonna make you stay up all night and shit your pants, but don't take something that's gonna give you insight into your life. You know.
Yeah. I mean, there's a great book. It's Chocolate to Morphine, and that was one that I read when I was younger, and I was like, it really lays out a very clear indicator that all these things that we think aren't drugs are drugs, like coffee and chocolate even.
Oh, absolutely. And, I can't even drink coffee now. I feel like I got shot out of a rocket.
Yeah. And all these, and then the bad drugs, everyone's like, oh, those are really bad, and they are. There's very bad things that could happen if you get addicted to them. But there is also there was uses for them. There are uses for these drugs for helping people. So that's a great book. And I forget the name of this other book that I read. It was really good, but I will send you a link to it as well. And it talked about the history of drugs, like all throughout the beginning of time to, pretty much today. And it talked about how all these people, how the drugs became illegal too. And that's an important thing to recognize too, is like, why did these drugs become illegal? And oddly enough, most of the drugs are illegal because the doctors started abusing the drugs, not the patients. So, because they were the ones that administered it and had the rights to it. So it's interesting. They're like, oh, this is too much for a normal human being, so we will make it illegal. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I have a classification. I call them garbage drugs. And it's not that there's no use for it, but like heroin as a street drug, there's no real use for that. Crack, meth, bath salts, I think you see like people like Hamilton from Hamilton Morris, he's doing stuff like getting a positive spin on PCP and doing a positive spin on meth and trying to, find these like little niches of these terrible things and how they've kind of gone wrong. And I think that's interesting, but I do think that some of those have a corrosive effect on your body and your mindset too. I don't.
I think that, it's important to go to the culture too and where these plants are, because like coca leaves, I think they're in Brazil. They chew it, and then the sad thing was, and this was maybe like 10 years ago, they were really upset because they used coca leaves to like as a stimulant to like help them do work, and it's part of their culture, and they really enjoy that. It's like us it's like saying like you can't drink coffee anymore, and people just lose their minds, and like they made it illegal because the American government was like, coca is cocaine, you can't do that. And they're like, what? Like, we've been doing this forever, and like we never had problems, until you guys came around. And it's like, and I don't know much about poppy, but it's probably the same thing in the Middle East. Like they were probably using it for some reason.
Time, like even ancient Asia, they found pipes with opium in them. I mean, that's been around since BC.
So who I think it's important to go back to the culture where these plants are and really look at that and say, like, how are these people using it? And were they okay?
Let me reform my statement, though. I guess what I should say is, if you now looking at what you just said, when you extract things like even cannabis now, like there's a reason why it's a medicine. And in the 60s, these people were smoking 2%, 3% THC. You smoke a joint now, it's got 30% THC, or you smoke vape something, it's got 80%. That's why it's a medicine. I think certain chemicals at certain doses have terrible effects. Like if you
Yeah,
take too much
absolutely.
heroin, you take too much meth, it's different than taking too much of a psychedelic or too much of pot or whatever, you know.
Well, like I have a problem with people just I haven't done it and I won't just for personal reasons, I guess, but I do have a problem with people taking DMT and smoking DMT, pure DMT, just because they're not getting the experience that you can get from ayahuasca. You know, they're looking for the short 45-minute experience, and ayahuasca
Are
lasts
you talking
for
about like 5-MeO, like the toad, the
well, that's a little
Bufo
different.
alvarez, the
That one's different because it comes out of the toad that way, you know. It's more
Yeah.
it's like a natural excretion from the toad.
Isn't that the most intense one out of
Yeah.
out of anything from the
I think
natural world?
yeah, I haven't done that one, but I've read books on it, and it's very intense from what their experiences are. But the experience that you get from ayahuasca is 6 hours of, you know, get your shit together kind of experience. It's not like 45 minutes of like, okay,
It's actually
I'll get-
therapeutic, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's not 15 minutes of this bliss where you're on.
right.
You know, like I think there's a story where Terrence McKenna gave a lama or somebody like some spiritual leader a hit of DMT or something, and this guy went into this thing and he came out and said that's the furthest you can go and come back. Meaning
Yeah.
like that was the furthest you can go to the other side and still come back and be a human being.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, you get an experience from that, but I don't think you get the real medicine. I mean, the real medicine to me is like the purge, you know, that's traumatic. It gets rid of a lot of
Yeah,
things.
that movie's traumatic, the fucking Purge.
Yeah, that is too. Totally different, but in a way, I guess. But
That's what's
you know,
going on in your gut, whatever's happening in
Yeah,
the movie,
yeah.
that's what happens in your
I mean,
gut.
in 6 hours, man, I have this. Okay, so like we're talking. I know we're getting at the end probably, but I had this.
Let's push it a little bit more. Let's see
yeah.
if we can push the boundaries a little bit.
This is a good story, so if you guys are listening, stay tuned. So on my first ayahuasca experience, it was kind of related. I hadn't read a lot of Carl Jung stuff at this time still, and so I didn't understand the archetypes, right? And do you get? I mean, for your listeners, archetypes are kind of like aspects of your consciousness, I guess, that in traditional like psychology, where you can kind of there's like themes to stories and stuff like that, and they kind of generate the stories and stuff. You never actually see them in Jungian psychology. You actually never like interact with these things. They're kind of like running the show in the background.
They're the machine elves, just
Yeah,
weaving
yeah,
our reality together.
Yeah, there you go. They might be machine elves. So, but what I found, okay, so I'm having this experience, and there's this lady. She's like a Hispanic lady in my stomach, and I call her the turning lady. And kind of reminds me of like I have Fight Club on here, you know, and it's one of my favorite movies. But in the movie, you hear one of the actors talking about he's reading this guy's books, his like notes, and he's like, "I am John's kidney or something, or liver. If I stop working, then John dies," or something. I totally messed the quote up, but anyways, he's talking about like aspects of himself. So in this experience I'm having with ayahuasca is that there is literally this Hispanic lady, and she's got a giant cauldron, and she turns it, and the quicker she turns it, the more I get sick. And she was talking to me, and she's like, I was like, God, stop turning. You know, I'm like, I've had enough. Stop turning. It's making me sick. And she's like, I gotta turn because you gotta throw this up. You gotta get rid of it. And so she didn't throw up, but you know, she's like Hispanic too. She like speaks in a Hispanic accent and everything. And she's like, but you gotta get this out. And I'm like, God. So every time I get sick, like I always forget about her, but when I get sick, she comes back, and I'm like, God, turning lady, you're back again. Like, let's just not do this right now. And she's like, I gotta get it out, you know? And then, and I think, and in the future, I started reading about Carl Jung's archetypes, and I was like, man, that shit is so real. Like, there's really things inside of us, like real life things. They're living beings, and they're like aspects of ourselves actually doing this stuff, you know. And for some reason, mine are Hispanic, so I don't know. It's weird. maybe South American or something.
Yeah, maybe that has something to do with your subconscious understanding of where it comes from, or the
you know,
the attachment to the background of it. maybe it's something in the plant. Wouldn't that be fucking
Yeah.
weird if it was something in the plant that resonated through culture, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, like, so people always talk about the ayahuasca lady, right? Like, they call her a she, you know, and it's this lady. And I've only had two like true hallucinations in my life, and one of them is that lady. So I could close my eyes and I could see her like with my eyes closed, and it would be her face, and it was just like plants interweaving into each other to make this like face, right? And I opened my eyes, and everywhere I looked, it was her face. Like everything turned into her face, and I was just like, that lady's always watching me, you know, like not in like a creepy weird way either. It was like she's kind of always there, you know.
And
And
I mean, Graham Hancock talks about that too, seeing like this woman, and she shows him his life about how he was smoking too much pot at the time and it was making him paranoid, and basically telling him like, you got to confront this kind of a thing, you know?
yeah, I think I mean, one thing that I'll probably leave your listeners on this is that the shamans say that when you take something, it doesn't go away. It's not like you take something and then that's it. The communication's done. It's when you take something, you open up a way of communication to those things, and they're always with you now. So wherever you go, you will have that with you. And I think that's comforting in some ways, you know, like okay, you know, I got a friend with me where I could have the shittiest day in my life, man, and I can always have a friend that is there. But on the other side, it's like, all right, I got to get my shit together too because my friend's there, you know. So it's a two-way streak, you know.
Well, what you said earlier, real quick before we end, but you said something earlier about spirits, like maybe ingesting spirits. I think that you look at the history of anything like alcohol, for instance, you know, the term spirits, people back then, they used to think that by drinking it, you were ingesting these spirits and they would overcome your body. And if you think about it, when you get drunk, you become a completely different person, pretty much, you know? Some people say that's your true self. I actually disagree with it. I think it's this buffoon that you have within you at all time. Maybe it's your ego, and you're letting your ego out, you know, you're letting your ego out with no tether, kind of a thing, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that that's true. So I think what you just said was a true statement in the sense that these things do stick with you, and it's not just a reminder, but it's also become part of your DNA because it's an experience that you can use going forward, you know. So
Yeah, I think I mean, a lot of us are trying to understand, especially myself, is trying to understand what's real and what's not real, you know. We're like, oh, the spirits, they're not real, you know, we can't show them, we can't prove them. But it's like, well, you and I can't prove that we're real either. So what I think is that all these things are real at the same time. They're all active at the same time. They all exist. So like they're aspects of your mind, but they're also real entities, you know, in a way. They're some other thing, but they
we had a
exist.
guest talk about that, where how thoughts and concepts and your future prospects could be, you know, like a melding. Like, I know it sounds stupid, just say hypothetically there were these machine elves and they take a piece from over here and they connect it to a piece over here, and then that becomes a whole new future or doorway to something else, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe that fully, but it's definitely an interesting concept. But let's wrap it up here. I mean, this was solid, bro. I mean, the information could just go flowing for days.
It's fun, man. Thanks.
We'll get you back on here soon for sure, and we'll talk about a couple different other topics. But it's been awesome, man. So Lee Adams, thank you for coming on. And
cheers, brother.
Cheers.
Everybody go to taileaters.com. That's taileaters.com. It's an amazing website. We'll catch you guys next time.
All right, sounds great, man. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks. Peace.